and welcome to Healthy Living on the Voice of America. I'm Lina Omudu. Autism, you may have heard of it, or maybe you haven't. It is a disorder that is usually first diagnosed in early childhood. Children with autism might have problems talking with you, or they might not look at you in the eye when they talk. They may have to line up their pencils before they can pay attention, or they may say the same sentence again and again to calm themselves down. Some people with autism never learn how to talk. On this two-part special, we take a special look at autism, a condition that still remains a great challenge in the medical community, as well as for those who care for the patients. Thanks, Deborah, for this report. Well, we now turn to our focus of today, autism, a lifelong, extremely complex and often devastating disability. Because people with autism can have very different features or symptoms, healthcare providers think of autism as a spectrum disorder. Scientists that are working to solve the mysteries of autism say their research points to genetic causes. The results come from the largest study ever done on the disorder, a study which looked at the genes of almost 1,200 families. Each had at least 2 autistic children. Voice of America's Carol Pearson has more.
Autism is a complex neurobiological disorder. It affects people throughout the world. It occurs in all racial, ethnic, and social groups, and is 4 times more likely to strike boys than girls. Teresa and Chris Waddell have 2 boys with mild autism.
Autism is such a wide spectrum. Every child presents differently.
Which is why it is really a group of disorders called Autism Spectrum Disorders, or ASD. ASD impairs a person's ability to communicate and relate to others. Those most severely affected cannot even talk. Scientists suspected a genetic cause, and this may have been confirmed by a new international study. Computers that can read billions of DNA signals in minutes showed specific genes and genetic abnormalities unique to these families. Geneticist Joseph Buxbaum is one of the principal investigators in the study. He explains what they found.
A smoking gun that implicates a series of genes that all work together that may together cause autism.
The researchers say the new study also shows environmental toxins do not cause autism spectrum disorders.
The evidence suggests that autism is over 90% caused by genes.
And not by just one gene, but by combinations of genes that may cause the different degrees and kinds of autism.
We have the beginnings of the beginning, I would call it. The message here is that there's great hope now.
The researchers say they hope their findings will lead to drugs that could reverse autism in 5 to 10 years. The researchers will now focus on the many genes they've identified in the autism families, hoping to find the exact role of each gene or abnormality and how they interact. Carol Pearson, VOA News.
Thanks, Carol. Joining me in the studio to discuss autism is Sandra Cunningham. She's the president of the Autism Society of America, District of Columbia chapter. Mrs. Cunningham, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's so good to have you. Let me first ask you to kind of explain to us this condition very simply for people who have never even heard about it. How can we understand autism?
Autism affects an individual in areas of speech, language, social skills, and interaction. Each individual is different. Some talk. In fact, about 80% of persons with autism do talk. Some of the most severe persons with autism have problems in communications and may never talk as we know talking. But some do with speech and language communication find ways to communicate their needs and their wants to their parents or their caregivers.
When I was reading about this condition, one thing that I found was the fact that more boys than girls were affected. Is it accurate?
That is correct. In our parent group in the DC chapter, presently all of the persons with autism, with the exception of one, is a girl. You know, it's one girl. When they go to camp during the summer, there are 8 boys and 1 girl.
Yeah,
so it's about
differences there.
4 out of 5 persons are boys.
You've been heading the organization for over 5 years now. Tell us about what you do in your chapter.
Okay, the DC chapter was organized probably in late 70s. It was reorganized in 1978, and it's chartered by the National Autism Society of America. We have a group of about 15 to 20 dedicated parents. We meet monthly to discuss issues such as the best care providers in terms of dental and medical, psychological. We also bring guests in to talk about how to get benefits as their children become older. At age 18, they are eligible for supplemental security income. And once they leave the school system at age 21, 22, we also bring in guests to see how they can become a part of, in the district, the Medicaid waiver program, where they go into day rehabilitation programs or job rehabilitation. They also get transportation and various other therapies, and most of these are done at home.
And basically, if I understand it correctly, your organization serves as a resource for information, care, and support.
Right. Support and referral. That's our basic function. Until a very long time, the local chapters were not permitted to provide services. Our chapter incorporated another group for us to set up a camp program for our children. And it's only for children of members. And each week in August, they go away to a camp for 1 week. And members raise money for that purpose.
Is it a condition that is very frequent among children?
At this time, the CDC is saying it's 1 in 150 children. And that's down from the late 60s. It's expanding. Yeah. Every day it seems to be expanding more and more.
So what would be the reason that we go from less children to more children now, considering obviously medical treatment, medical care is improving with the time? How can we explain this?
I think more the diagnosis, there's been more emphasis on it, more publicity about it, so parents are looking at it. The medical profession has taken another look. When my son Troy was 18, 20 months old, the doctor said, oh, he's a healthy baby. He's a boy. Boys do things slower. There's nothing wrong with him. So it was not until someone asked me and said, can he hear, that I began to notice different things. And I took him to Gallaudet University, where they have an excellent program for hearing impaired, and they said, oh, he can hear. From there, I took him to Harvard University's Child Development Center, and they recommended that we take him to the Linwood Center, which is a special school for persons with autism in Ellicott City, Maryland, and he was given an official diagnosis of autism.
So obviously you became involved because your son has autism. He's, yes. You told me earlier when we spoke off camera that he's 35 going on 36.
Right.
What was it like 36 years ago to have a son with autism? One of the reasons you talked about was the fact that there was no diagnosis, very interesting or very good diagnosis back then. So what was it like 36 years ago to have a son with autism?
Well, it meant that we had to do I did a lot of phone calls. Troy had a lot of tests. It was like pulling hair because no one had any answers for the most part. And I saw one of the PSA blurbs about autism, and that's when I started asking questions. And
so a lot of people didn't really know what it was.
Right.
They didn't really know. So what kind of diagnosis did you receive from some doctors? Did they say, you just say one of his doctors said boys are slower than girls. What other diagnosis did you hear?
Most of them had none because of the age, between 3, because he was not quite 3. They didn't see anything wrong with him at all.
Mm-hmm. They didn't confuse it with other conditions like schizophrenia or anything like that?
No.
Okay. And you were able to follow through the autism link because you saw a PSA?
Yes.
So you were the one who went forward and told your doctor that he may have autism?
Yes, I did. And from there, he went to the Georgetown University Child Development Center, had more tests, more observations, a nutrition test. They did lead testing and came up with the same conclusion. Because there's no blood test you can give for a person to see if they have autism.
Indeed, yeah.
It's based on observations, and most of those observations come from parents or caregivers, or if they're in school, from the teachers.
Okay.
But at this stage, teachers had not seen a great deal of this, yes.
All right, we're going to take a short break and we'll come and continue our discussion. So it's now time for a break. More healthy living when we return, so don't go away. Welcome back to Healthy Living on the Voice of America. I'm Lenore Moudou, and we are discussing autism. My guest is Sandra Cunningham, president of the Autism Society of America, District of Columbia chapter. Also joining us now after the break is Mrs. Bridget Covenant. She's the parent of an autistic child. Ladies, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mrs. Covenant, let me start with you. Thank you for joining us, by the way, during the break. You have a son who is autistic. He's over 5 years old. Can you tell us about your son?
Yeah, my son is now, he just turned 7, and he's autistic. He has a spectrum. And I don't know if you want to go into when we discovered all that stuff.
Let's talk about when you first found out that he was autistic.
Okay, when we first found out that he was autistic when he was about 4 years old. Actually, his pediatrician didn't find this out. He went on vacation in Canada to see his grandpa. That's when when he ended up at his cousin's pediatrician, he realized something was wrong with my son.
The cousin's
pediatrician. Yeah, because my son wanted to tag along with his cousin because she was sick. So they went to see the pediatrician in Canada. So he just tagged along, and then the pediatrician noticed that my son had something that was not right. So he asked his grandpa, he said, whose son is this? And he said that, you know, it's my son, his parents are in America and all that. So the pediatrician said, he has something, he has a spectrum, and he wrote down everything, the diagnosis, the prognosis, everything right then and there. And my uncle actually faxed me the prognosis from Canada and told me that Diana, who is my son's cousin, pediatrician, say he has something called autism.
And that's how you found out? And
that's how I found out.
What did you do as soon as you found this out? Did you ring a bell into your mind that all along you thought something was wrong with your son, or were you completely shocked?
Well, we knew something was wrong, and we kept asking his pediatrician here in America, not to, you know, badmouth his pediatrician here in America, but this pediatrician kept telling me not to worry because we speak 2 languages, you know, French and English. So he kept telling me, boys are late bloomers, don't worry. You know,
a little bit like what you said, Mrs. Cunningham.
Exactly.
She was talking about that earlier.
Yeah, so we didn't worry, and we kept, you know, not worrying until we realized that there was something wrong. So when I got that from the pediatrician in Canada, I was devastated.
Of course. So what did you do as soon as your son returned from Canada? What was the first step that you took?
I called the pediatrician, first of all, to lash out on him and give him, you know, let him have a piece of me. And then there's a phone number in school where they say if you need help, call. And I called that number from the school, and they told me about what they call Child Find. It's a program where you go there and they test your kid to see exactly what's wrong, whether he has autism. You know, it's a spectrum, so to know where he is,
what level
and all that.
Yes.
Right. So that's where we were.
So what did they find out after the test?
Yeah, they confirmed what the doctor said.
What was his level, if I can use that term? Was it very critical or a beginning stage, or how do you determine?
They call it high functioning. His particular level is called PDD, pervasive development disorder. It's called PDD. So on the level, you have the Asperger's syndrome here, which is the high level high functioning, and you have he's about this side here, and then you have the extreme on the other side.
Okay.
So he's not extreme; he's towards the high functioning side.
Let me stop there with you and come to you, Mrs. Cunningham. At what level was your son when he was diagnosed?
I don't know whether they gave him a label. This was, but I think he's probably closer to the end, based on the fact that he does not have a spoken language to speak of, even though he has a good memory. There are a lot of things he can do for himself, but he does not have that. He doesn't have the ability to really communicate and, like hold a job without having someone 24/7 supervising and helping him. Okay. He can get put on his own clothes, and there are chores that he can do around the house, and he knows when the end of the month comes, he changes the calendar. Okay. All the calendar.
So he can do some
certain things, yeah, okay. But I wouldn't call him.
And he's not fully independent or anything like that?
No.
Okay. Mrs. Cabena, let me come back to you. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but tell us what you're doing now with regards to your son. He's 7-year-old. You found out he was autistic when he was 4, so 3 years of treatment, of follow-up. Yes. What happened? What has been happening?
Well, we moved to Arizona because through my research I realized that there was a lot of autism centers in the Southwest. So we moved there without thinking. We could have stayed here in the East Coast, but we went there. So through there we went through what we call the SOC program, which is the behavioral intervention program. That they literally gave them word to speak, because the thing with autistic kids, they need to have the word to use. So they did the speech therapy. It was one step at a time. We did that, and then we went through also the homeopathy. That's the path that we chose. We chose
homeopathy.
The homeopathic.
Because?
Yeah, because the homeopathic seems to work very well with Vinny, because Vinny is his nickname, because with the homeopathic, he helped him develop the senses that his body didn't develop because of the autism. For example, if he didn't know how to play in a group,
big crowd,
he was very shy. Through the homeopathic remedy and medicine, he actually learned step by step how to accept the crowd, and the sensory more and more, tuned to what he's doing.
And now you've seen a tremendous change from when he was diagnosed to now?
Oh yeah, a tremendous change. Like she said, her son doesn't have a word, my son didn't have any word at all, but now he can communicate, he can talk, he even make jokes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. We ran out of time to discuss autism, but we're definitely going to have a second part, and I hope to have you ladies back soon so we can continue this conversation. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Healthy Living on the Voice of America. I'm Lenore Moudou. Today we bring you the second part of our special on autism. 2 weeks ago we introduced you to 2 mothers whose children are autistic. Today we'll speak with 2 experts who have experience working with autistic children and who can provide more information for all of you who sent us questions about the condition. Moving now to autism, a new survey in the United States indicates that approximately 1 in every 150 children in the country has autism, suggesting the condition may be more common than previously thought. Earlier studies had placed the prevalence of autism at 1 in 160 American children. Voice of America's Paul Cisco has more.
The survey of children with autism is the largest and most comprehensive ever undertaken. It shows that about 560,000 children in the United States have the condition. Wendy Stone's child is one of them.
I'm hoping that 1 in 150 is alarming enough to the government and to our healthcare providers for them to pay a lot of attention to it.
Autism is a little understood neurological and behavior syndrome that interferes with a child's ability to relate or interact with others. Many of its victims are withdrawn and have difficulty speaking. The new survey by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is not a nationwide study, but based on data from only 14 states. Still, many in the medical community and among support groups found the numbers staggering. Lee Grossman is with the Autism Society of America.
It actually validates what we've been saying all along, that the numbers of people being diagnosed with autism is much higher than had what previously been stated.
The U.S. Congress recently allocated $945 million to learn more about the condition.
We need to now go back to Congress and to the agencies to ask for more services for this growing population.
More money on research is needed because very little is known about possible risk factors for autism, what causes it, or even how to recognize it biologically. It is known that if an autistic child is identified before the age of 3, intervention is much more effective. Paul Sisko, VOA News.
Thank you, Paul. Autism is also prevalent in Africa, and joining me from Johannesburg, South Africa, is Dr. Lorna Barbara Jacqueline, a pediatrician at the Memorial Institute for Child Health and Development in Johannesburg. Dr. Jacqueline, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us by phone. And also joining us from the Midwest U.S. city of Phoenix, Arizona by phone is Neepa Sevak, a homeopathic practitioner who sits on the Board of International Affairs at the American Medical College of Homeopathy, located in Phoenix. Ms. Sevak, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lenore.
Let me start with you, Dr. Jacqueline. In my research, of course, I read that autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder. How can we simply describe this condition and understand it?
Autism is a behavioral problem, primarily. These children, although they're delayed in various aspects of development, are, if you look at them and you do a neurological examination, they're totally normal, and it's really the behavior that is unusual. They lack communication skills is the main problem, and then they also show unusual repetitive behavior and a lack of capacity to play in a creative way. So it's really their behavior that shows that they're different to other children, and the main problem that we deal with is the inability to communicate, both receive communication and to put out communication, which impedes their behavior most significantly.
So basically, the behavior is one of the ways that we determine if a child is autistic. Let me go to you, Ms. Sevak. You are a homeopathic practitioner with experience working with autistic children. Is there a specific way in homeopathy to diagnose autism?
Yes, absolutely. Homeopathic treatment of autism is what we call in our homeopathic term is constitutional, which is like a holistic approach. It believes in the concept of treating the whole person. So what the history taking that we take, it takes into account the patient's mental, emotional, and the physical attributes. It's more considered as a mind and body process.
As far as the diagnosis is concerned, how do you proceed?
For the diagnosis, what we would do is it's done in an in-office interview, which lasts for like 1 to 2 hours, where I understand the aspects of the child, their minute details verbally or non-verbally, ask many questions, observations about the child's sleeping, eating habits, temperament, personality, behavior with other children, or, behavior to changes in routine. How the parents behave with them, the relationship between the child and the parent, mother's pregnancy history. When all of this is put together, it gives a complete constitutional picture, which makes it easy to come to a diagnosis and to get the treatment.
Let's talk about treatment. Dr. Jacqueline, can we say there is effective treatment in treating children with autism, considering it's a spectrum disorder, so every child has a specific need? How do we approach treatment?
Absolutely. And not just a specific need. Obviously, there are many different causes for autism. So one's got to not just look at the causes, what's the underlying cause, but also the wide variability in the spectrum of the behavior. So I think that there's a big overlap with the way the homeopathic approach and the medical approach, because one's looking at targeting the behavior, and then really largely it's about behavioral modification. That will be the way people around the child interact with the child and help the child to behave in a more appropriate way. The children are not identical, because if you say the child's got autistic spectrum disorder, children are very, very different. We have a little school where I work with children who are autistic, and they're very different. And some children are highly intelligent and highly functional, whereas other children are severely learning disabled and much less functional. So one has to really look at every single child. What is the etiology in that child? What is the specific behavioral profile in the child? Are the associated medical problems, such as epilepsy or allergies or different problems? So you really have to do a specific program for every single child you see. And we know that there's quite a large genetic predisposition to the condition, so one's got to look at the family and the extended family as well.
So, Dr. Jacqueline, if I understand it correctly, you talk about behavior modification with regards to treating a child with autism.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
And a lot of behavior modification is working with a parent. So I'd agree with that. It is a holistic approach. One has to be very holistic in the management of these children.
Okay, great. We'll take a short break. When we return, Ms. Sevak, I will go to you so you can give us more details as far as how you approach treating a child with autism. So don't go away. We'll be right back to continue this conversation. Welcome back to Healthy Living on the Voice of America. I'm Lenore Moudou. We continue our discussion on autism as we look at two different approaches to addressing the condition. My guests are medical doctor Lorna Jacqueline, who is joining us from Johannesburg, South Africa, and homeopathic practitioner Neepa Sevak, who is joining us from Phoenix, Arizona. And Ms. Sevak, let me go to you. You talked about the holistic approach in treating autism. Can you give us a little more detail on that?
Yeah, what it means is that, you know, each of us have our own, each of us have our own individual personality. And homeopathy considers a patient with a mind and body process where each child's personality traits are very important as their physical symptoms. So taking into account their diet, their lifestyle, their personality, surroundings, and emotional factors, when all of this is put together, that is what makes the genetic makeup of the child. And a treatment based on that is what can actually lead to the cure.
And we've noticed that with the report we saw right before this interview, that the numbers are rising with regards to autistic children. Dr. Jacqueline, is this a reality in South Africa or the whole of Africa? Are there more children that are autistic now than there were maybe 10 or 20 years ago?
That's always a difficult question to answer, but certainly the research I've just completed in the clinic I work at shows that there's been a 10-fold rise over the last 10 years in children that we're seeing. So we're certainly seeing many children. I see new cases every day, so it's common. I think one's always got to remember that the awareness has increased. So detection has increased, which will play a role in what we're seeing. But I do actually believe that there's an absolute increase in the number of children as well. So I think it's a composite of increased awareness, increased detection, and an absolute increase in the condition.
Ms. Sevak, can you respond to this question? Do you see more autistic children now as there were maybe 10 years ago? Ms. Sevak, are you there? Okay, let me come back to you, Dr. Jacqueline. Tell us about the reality on the ground in Johannesburg and the whole of South Africa and even Africa, if you may, about the way autism is being addressed on the continent.
Okay. Well, Johannesburg is probably a little bit different to other areas because it's quite a well-developed area with a well-resourced area. So there are a number of services developing, but unfortunately many more for the privileged than for the non-privileged community, which is sad. And the less privileged the society and the community, the less facilities there are. So although there are services in the bigger centres, in the smaller centres there are no services available at the moment. And as you're going to the countries surrounding South Africa, there's very, very little available, so that we have people coming to us from Zambia and Mozambique and Swaziland, where so we actually using the resources that we're developing in South Africa and largely in Johannesburg. So there's a big need for us developing services throughout Southern Africa, and I don't know that we extend into further north, but there's a tremendous need for the development of services. I know there are services developing in Kenya. So there are other countries around us that are also developing services, which is nice to see, but we need to be working together and networking and really developing a uniquely African solution to the problem. We find that that the imported programs are not always relevant to our local community. They're far too expensive. They're far too labor intensive. Another problem that we also deal with is that people who come and train in Africa expect to be paid, which is reasonable, but it's very expensive to bring in experts from other countries.
Okay. Let me go to you, Ms. Sevak. I think we lost you just for a second. I read on your website, and I quote, if autism is inherited due to a vaccine reaction or a toxin, then homeopathic remedies will help with detoxification by promoting the immune system, end quote. How do you proceed with detoxification?
Homeopathic remedies, what we describe as are designer medicines, and they are specially designed for individuals based upon their unique state of being. So this process, I would say, is like a mystery where in the homeopathic, detective attempts are to discover where the flow of energy in the body is blocked or impeded. And the homeopath's goal is not only to remove the symptoms, but also to eliminate the essential problem by stimulating the body's natural curative powers. And that's what the homeopathic remedies work by, stimulating the natural process of the body to eliminate, to cleanse itself of the poisons, which could be environmental pollution, the mercury in the vaccine, or substance abuse, any allergens, or anything that might have caused it.
And that leads me to something that I wanted to discuss with the both of you, and I would have your opinion on this. The impact of vaccine on autism, on provoking autism in a child. I've read so many times about the fact that vaccine was causing autism in some children. Dr. Jacqueline, let me go to you. Can you comment on that?
I know about the initial research, and the initial researcher has actually rejected his own research. There's been extensive research, because that's a very dangerous thing to say, is that the vaccine is causing autism, and there's been extensive research that has totally disproven the original theory. So there is no evidence that vaccines cause autism, and it's a very, very dangerous thing to be saying, because it can land up in epidemics of diseases that are going to kill children. So I think that that's very dangerous.
And Ms. Sevak, let me have your comment on that, the effect of some vaccine in children leading to autism.
Well, what I think is, the neurological damage that is very characteristic with autism is similar to the side effects of mercury, aluminum, and, certain toxicities of that. And these neurotoxins are common vaccine ingredients. So that is why people would link it with autism. I mean, that autism is due to vaccines, but I agree with the doctor that, yeah, it is dangerous because there is no such evidence. And because of the signs that start appearing, or when the parents start noticing, is around the same time as, most of the vaccines are given, around 12 to 15-month-old children. So that is why people just link it with the vaccines, but I would not, see a direct connection with it.
But I've spoken with some parents who were convinced that the vaccine was the reason their child has developed the condition. So what do we say to them to change that way of thinking? What is being done, Dr. Jacqueline?
I must just comment that I met such a parent who was convinced, and then when I sat down and listened to the bigger story, her other children also had problems, and there was clearly a genetic problem within the family, which she was, it's sometimes easy to have a reason. And it's possible that if a child has got a very strong genetic predisposition, that something may tip the scales in that particular child. But really looking at big studies, and they've studied this extensively, they've been unable to link this. And that's all one can say to parents, that doctors have gone out to really look at it, because we have to be sure that with vaccination we're not damaging children, and that we're actually stopping them from getting ill. And I think that's the answer.
And Ms. Sevak, what is your reaction to that? Because the quote that I read earlier talked about vaccine and the link to autism. So I'm trying to understand correctly. Are you saying that there is no clear evidence or research that have proven the link between the two?
That is absolutely right. There is no evidence which has proven that vaccines are a cause of autism. Like I said, it's, most autism symptoms are very similar to mercury poisoning symptoms, and mercury is one of the content in the vaccine, so people try to link to it, but it has not been proven.
Okay. Ms. Jacqueline, let me go to you and tell us about what a parent should do in the African context, where you even said yourself earlier, it is a little bit challenging in some areas. If a parent sees the symptoms and he thinks that a child has autism, what should he do?
Well, I think that the diagnosis is important, because parents walk around, many of our children that we see, the behavior is because the parents can't cope with the child. And once the parents are even given a fairly simplistic behavior management program, it's amazing how well the children do. I've seen dramatic responses where the parents are being supported and are just given guidance on how to handle the child. And in the absence of better facilities, that's a starter. We do need to stand together as a community and start demanding from the government that there's intervention, that there's special nursery schools, that the schools understand the problem. So that's really forming pressure groups to make the government provide facilities and support for these children.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jacqueline, for joining us today from Johannesburg. Ms. Sevak, thank you so much for enlightening us on homeopathy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.